Now, the first area of change, remember, for women is women made gender visible. Now, the problem with this is that when women made gender visible, it remains visible largely to women. Most men don't know that gender is as important to them as women know it is for them. You teach a course called like Psychology of Women, Sociology of Women, you get like 95% women. Teach a course called Psychology of Gender, Sociology of Gender, you get 90% women. One of my colleagues once said rather derisively, real men don't study gender. So, gender remains invisible to men, and that's political. And so it's the heart of what I want to talk about. So I'm going to tell you my own story about this. This story starts 30 years ago when I was just finishing my PhD at Berkeley, and I was teaching at UC Santa Cruz. And a bunch of us, you know, when new faculty and graduate students, like, you know, they get so excited about all these new ideas that are happening. And so one day, a bunch of us were sitting around, and somebody said, you know, there's this explosion of writing and thinking in feminist theory, but we don't have any courses yet. So we did what graduate students and new faculty typically do. We said, let's have a study group. We'll get together, we'll read a text, we'll talk about it, we'll have a potluck. So, so each week, 11 women and me got together. We read some text in feminist theory, talked about it, and during one of our meetings, I witnessed a conversation. Now, this is a conversation that really is going to sound really anachronistic now for exactly the reasons that will be obvious to you. But I witnessed a conversation between two of the women that changed things for me forever. One of the women was white, and one was black. And the white woman said, this is really 30 years ago idea, the white woman said, all women are similarly situated in patriarchy. All women have the same oppression, and therefore all women have a kind of intuitive solidarity or sisterhood. And the black woman said, I'm not so sure. Let me ask you a question. So the black woman says to the white woman, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, what do you see? And the white woman said, I see a woman. And the black woman said, you see, that's the problem for me. When I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, she said, I see a black woman. To me, race is visible. But to you, race is invisible. You don't see it. And then she said something really startling. She said, that's how privilege works. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. It is a luxury, I would say, to the white people sitting in this room not to have to think about race every split second of our lives. That's what privilege does. So remember, I was the only man in this group. So when I heard this, I kind of put my head in my hand and groaned, and somebody said, well, what was that reaction? And I said, well, when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, I see a human being. I'm kind of the generic person. You know, I'm a middle-class white man. I have no race, no class, no gender. I'm universally generalizable. So I like to think that that was the moment 30 years ago when I became a middle-class white man. That class and race and gender were now visible to me. And it had been privileged and it kept them invisible to me for such a long period of time. Now, I wish I could tell you, anachronistic as this story was, I wish I could tell you that it ends there. But I was reminded of it just last year. I have a female colleague at Stony Brook, and she and I both teach the Sociology of Gender class. So we always give guest lectures in each other's classes. So last year, I go to give the guest lecture in her class, 300 students. And I walk in, and one of the students looks up and says, oh, finally, an objective opinion. All semester long, whenever my female colleague opened her mouth, what my students saw was a woman, right? Carolyn, if you were to stand up in front of my students and say, there is structural inequality based on gender in the United States, they would say, well, of course you'd say that. You're a woman. You're biased. When I say it, they go, wow, that's interesting. Is that going to be on the test? How do you spell structural? So I want you to know, I hope that you in the back can see this. This is what objectivity looks like. Disembodied Western rationality. That's why I wear a tie. Because I think if you are going to embody disembodied Western rationality, you need a signifier. You need need something that shows you to be the objective voice. And what better signifier of disembodied Western rationality than a garment that at one end is a noose and the other end points to the genitals? Let me put it this way. This here, this is mind-body dualism in silk. Now, think about this, though. Think about what that means, that privilege is invisible. Think about the way we talk. I suppose this is a Mars and Venus moment, but I'd ask the women in the room, you've had a conversation, argument, discussion, dispute, debate with a guy who says finally to you, wait, let's look at this objectively. Now, the translation from Martian is, let's look at this from my point of view. Okay? But think about the way we think in academia. We talk about the feminization of poverty. We make discrimination visible. Nobody talks about the masculinization of wealth, right? We talk about women's wages as a function of men's wages. The discrimination is visible, not the privilege. We say women make 78 cents for every man's dollar. Why don't we say a man makes $1.35 for every dollar a woman makes? We get a 35-cent bonus just for having a Y chromosome. We got to make privilege visible. I'll give you one other example of this. You all probably use your oxy.edu email addresses. Okay, so have you ever communicated with somebody in another country on email? What do you notice about their email addresses that are different from ours? It ends differently. It has a country code at the end, right? You want to write to somebody in Japan, you got to write .jp, right? Even if it's an academic institution, .ac, academic.uk in Britain, .edu.au for Australia. Have you ever asked yourself, how come the United States is the only country that doesn't have a country code at the end of its email addresses? Here's a hint, it's not because Al Gore invented the internet. It's because when you're the dominant power in the world, every other country is other. Every other country is marked, every other country is labeled, every other country is other. That's what privilege looks like. It's invisible to those who have it. Let me put it this way. Only an American could have written a song with the title, We Are the World. So why is this so important, this idea that gender is invisible to men? Because without giving young men and boys a way to feel safe and confident and secure in their masculinity, we men will think of all kinds of ways to prove it all the time. Masculinity becomes a kind of relentless test, always up for grabs, always having to be proved. And that's where that first rule of masculinity comes in, no sissy stuff. You all know this. The most common put down in middle schools and high schools today is "that's so gay." And "that's so gay" doesn't really have much to do with sexual orientation anymore. It's become completely detached from sexuality. It's now basically wrong, and stupid, right? I mean, if I say to you, dude, that hat is so gay, you would know, right, that I am not saying, I believe you may have erotic interests in members of your gender. Right? You would know, I think it looks stupid, right? You would know that. It's about masculinity. Well, you don't have to believe me. Listen to the words of my favorite gender theorist in America. That would be Eminem. You were waiting for Judith Butler or something, right?